All right, welcome back, ladies and gents of A23. We are back for another wonderful chapter from our new book, The Littles Go to School. I hope you guys had a great weekend. It looks like we have a pretty rainy week ahead of us, but that's all right. You'll have a few more chapters to listen to in our ELA Google Classroom. You can check out the Math Google Classroom. I put up a bunch of different math games for you guys to play, which practices all those different skills we've been working on all year. And then make sure you join our Transition Google Classroom, which I just created. I'm going to be uploading some social groups into there for you guys to discuss with your families. So this week we have a new guest reader with us. He is someone who we all know, and some of us love. He calls our classroom like 30 times a day, asking for food and coffee. And his best friend is a Chihuahua named Bella. You know who he is? I'm sure you figured it out by now, but if not, you'll find out soon enough. So, in chapter 1 of our book, we learned that Tom and Lucy go to school. We also learned that they sort of spy on Henry Big to see the sort of work he's doing for his school. And we learned that Tom has procrastinated and has put off doing his schoolwork, and their teacher is going to be coming to visit soon. So, chapter 2.
Lights,
camera, action!
Let's get started. It was lunchtime the next day. The Littles were in the kitchen of their apartment in the wall of the Big's house. The whole family was there. Tom and Lucy, their parents, Mr. and Mrs. William T. Little, their baby sister Betsy, Granny and Grandpa Little, Uncle Nick, and Uncle Pete. The Littles were not the only tiny family in the Big Valley. There were tiny people living in the woods, other families who lived in cozy burrows under the ground and in trees, and even tinies who lived in the town dump. Tiny people like the Littles who lived with big people called themselves house tinies. All tiny people had tails. In every other way, they looked like very small, ordinary people. Their tails were good looking. The tiny people were proud of them and always kept them well brushed. An amazing thing about the tiny people was that no big person had ever seen one of them. The tinies didn't trust big people, even though they were fond of some of them. Tiny people were fast and clever. Every house tiny worked hard at knowing the best hiding places in the house he lived in. There were secret doors, too. Mrs. Little had picked up their lunch of leftovers by using the electric socket door on the kitchen counter. Take it away, Lemler.
Here we go. As the Littles were sitting around their kitchen table, Mr. Little said, "Well, Tom, I've been telling you that you had better get going on your schoolwork. Now your teacher is coming and you're late." Tom looked down. "I'm sorry, Dad. Why didn't you let the boy be?" said Granny Little. "You know very well, William, that tiny children are allowed to learn whatever they wish after they've learned their reading, writing, and arithmetic. And they can learn just as fast or as slow as they want to." "It's a silly way of teaching children, if you ask me," said Uncle Nick. Granny Little laughed, and I said, "I suppose they do better at the town dump."
Nicely done, Lemler and Bella. Uncle Nick was a retired major in the Mouse Force Brigade. He'd been a soldier for 30 years fighting mice in Trash City. This was the tiny people's city in the town dump. "As far as I can see, it is done better at Trash City," said Uncle Nick. "They have a regular school and teachers. The children are in school from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon." "Well, of course we can't do that," said Mr. Little. "House tinies are too far apart for that to work. The best we can do is send them to the big children's school for a week. Their teacher, Miss Betta Gog, does an excellent job with them there." "1 week seems hardly worth the effort," said Uncle Nick. "That's what I think," said Lucy. "Now, Lucy," said Mr. Little, "we've been over this 1,000 times. You know the rules. All the tiny children over 8 have to go to school for at least a week after the big children are finished for the year." "But I've never been," Lucy said. Her lip trembled. "I'm afraid." "Oh, Lucy, there's nothing to be afraid of," said Tom. "Weren't you afraid the first time you went?" Lucy asked. "Well, I suppose a little," Tom said. "But really, Lucy, there's nothing to it." "I still don't see why I have to go," said Lucy. "Miss Gog comes to see us every month, and we learn lots of stuff on our own." "But Lucy, it's fun too," said Tom. "You get to see lots of tiny kids from all over the Big Valley. We use the chalkboards, We read some of the textbooks the big kids use. There are maps and charts. And we live in dormitories in the walls of the classroom. You'll like it. I'll bet, said Lucy. She made a face. Mrs. Little put her arm around Lucy. Your teacher's very fond of you, Lucy. She knows that some of the new students are worried about going to school. Mr. Little nodded his head. Miss Gog will watch out for you, Lucy, he said. We're very lucky to have a teacher who's intelligent and well-informed, said Mrs. Little. Miss Gog ought to be well-informed, said Mr. Little. She's lived in the walls of the school for years and years. When is she coming to see you, said Uncle Nick. This week, said Tom. Cousin Dinky and Della are flying her in their glider from house to house, said Mr. Little. She'll stay 2 days as usual. Uncle Nick shook his head. I still say 2 days a month doesn't seem like enough time to get any real teaching done, he said. Well, it always has been enough time, said Mrs. Little. Miss Gog goes over what Tom and Lucy have done since she was here last, and they talk about what they'll do for the next month. So it sounds like Tom and Lucy have to be pretty creative in how they get to go to school, which is pretty similar to what we're experiencing right now since I'm talking to you guys through a YouTube video in our Google Classroom. So, here's what I want you to think about. If Tom and Lucy were to come to our school and visit our classroom for a week, what do you think they would learn? So think about all of the things that are in our classroom right now. All the activities we do, the things that are on the walls, the different sort of supplies that we have and use. So if they spend a week in our classroom while we're away at home, what sort of things do you think Tom and Lucy would learn? When you come up with some good ideas, write them in the comments. I have thoroughly enjoyed reading all of the comments from last week's chapter. You guys are cracking me up. Jonathan, I hope you're not eating too many pigeons. Thank you to Mr. Lemler and Bella for joining us for Chapter 2. And keep on washing your hands. I'll see you guys for Chapter 3. Bye.